Imagine a man tired of city life, seeking peace in a quiet village. On his way, he spots an injured cat by the roadside. Being an animal lover, he stops to help. Little does he know, this simple act of kindness will lead to a life-changing journey he never saw coming. The story begins with a young man named Joe from Houston. He had always dreamed of adventure and wanted to explore the world. After a tough year, Joe felt like he needed a break. He decided to go on a solo vacation to Mexico, hoping to escape the routine of everyday life. Joe had heard amazing things about the country's culture, food, and landscapes, but he wanted more. He wasn't interested in the usual tourist spots. Instead, he wanted to discover small villages and hidden cities that most people never see. Joe wanted to experience the true Mexico, the one only locals knew. What he didn't know was that his journey would lead him to something far more unexpected, a life-changing encounter that would change everything. So he packed his backpack, eager to explore the real Mexico. As Joe drove down a dusty road, he suddenly saw a small, frail stray cat lying by the side. He had always loved animals, and something about this little cat broke his heart. The poor thing looked weak and helpless, its ribs showing through its thin fur. Joe couldn't ignore it. Without a second thought, he pulled over and knelt beside the cat. As he stretched out his hand, the kitten slowly lifted its head, and with a soft meow, it limped toward him. A connection formed instantly. Joe gently picked up the kitten, feeling how light and fragile it was. The little animal seemed so thankful for the attention. Joe glanced around, unsure of what to do next. He saw a few locals standing nearby, watching him with curious eyes. They shouted something in Spanish, but Joe didn't understand. Despite that, he knew one thing for sure. He had to help. Determined, he cradled the kitten in his arms, ready to find a way to care for it. Joe didn't have any food with him, so he decided to take the kitten to the nearest pet store to buy some kibble. As he walked through the village with the little creature in his arms, something about the place felt off. The locals' stares grew more intense, their eyes following him everywhere. Soon they started shouting warnings in Spanish, but Joe didn't understand the words. He just focused on his goal, getting food for the kitten. Finally, Joe found a small pet store tucked between two buildings. Inside, he quickly grabbed some cat food, but a strange feeling lingered. The warnings from the locals kept echoing in his mind. He couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. He paid for the food, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside him. Walking back to his car with the kitten still in his arms, Joe didn't know that he was about to walk straight into trouble. He was driven by a simple desire to help, but in that moment, he couldn't see the bigger picture. As he looked down at the kitten, he couldn't help but think that this meeting was more than a random encounter. It was almost as if the kitten had been waiting for him, leading him down a path he couldn't yet understand. As Joe drove around Mexico, his mind kept going back to the kitten. He couldn't stop thinking about what to do next. Should he find a shelter for it here, or should he take it back home with him to Houston? Joe knew taking the kitten home would be difficult, but the bond between them was undeniable. The kitten seemed to trust him completely, and he couldn't just leave it behind. With a heavy heart but strong determination, Joe decided to bring the kitten with him. He carefully packed the kitten into his car, bought more food, and prepared for the long drive back to the United States. It wouldn't be easy, but Joe felt it was the right thing to do. He was the only one who could help this little creature. The drive back to Houston was smoother than Joe expected. But at the border, his nerves got the best of him. The border guards looked at him suspiciously and asked about the kitten. Without missing a beat, Joe said he was traveling with his new pet. The guards exchanged a few whispers in Spanish, but eventually let him through. Joe was surprised by how easy it was, and with Ella, the kitten, by his side, he crossed back into the United States, feeling both relieved and amazed. Once Joe arrived home, the first thing he knew he had to do was take Ella to the vet. He quickly scheduled an appointment to get her checked out and to make sure all the paperwork was in order. But as he looked down at the tiny kitten, he realized he had never even named her. After a moment of thought, Joe decided to call her Ella, a name that seemed to suit her perfectly. Despite her rough start in life, she was sweet, gentle, and had a calm, almost royal demeanor. Ella settled into her new home quickly. She started eating well and gaining strength. However, Soon Joe began to notice some strange changes in her behavior. The kitten, who had once been so affectionate and cuddly, was now acting out in ways Joe had never seen before. She would suddenly bite him without warning and scratch him fiercely. Joe was puzzled and concerned. This wasn't like any cat he'd owned. At first, he thought it might be normal kitten behavior, but as time passed, Ella's aggression grew worse. She scratched at her carrier with a sense of urgency, and the once sweet kitten seemed to be changing into someone, or something, different. Worried, Joe decided to take her to the vet again, hoping they could help him understand what was going on. During the car ride to the vet, Ella's behavior only got worse. She growled and scratched at her carrier, her tiny body shaking with fear. Joe couldn't understand what was happening. She had been fine during the long journey from Mexico to Houston, so why was she acting like this now? Had something happened to her on the way? At the vet, Joe explained everything he had noticed. The doctor carefully examined Ella and gave Joe unexpected news. He told Joe that Ella was in shock and severely malnourished. Her behavior was caused by the tough life she had before Joe found her, and she needed time to heal. The vet gave Ella some medicine and told Joe to bring her back for a checkup in a month. Joe felt confused and a little guilty. He thought she was fine, but now it was clear she was still struggling. But Joe was determined to help her, no matter how long it took. But things took an even more bizarre turn just a few days later. Joe was in the middle of his usual routine when he heard a loud, persistent knock at his door. Confused, he walked over and opened it, only to find 2 uniformed police officers standing outside. They asked him if he had a kitten in his house, and feeling a mix of confusion and fear, Joe told them that he did. The officers then asked if they could search his home. Joe, now completely bewildered, agreed. They moved through the house, looking for the kitten. When they finally saw Ella, their reaction was immediate and startling. They called for backup, and without offering any explanation, they took Ella away from Joe. He was furious and frightened, but there was little he could do. As they placed Ella into their police carrier, the officers finally told him the shocking truth. Ella wasn't a stray kitten after all. She was a rare and endangered Mexican bobcat, a wild animal that it was illegal to own in the United States. Joe was stunned. He never imagined that the kitten he found on the side of the road could be anything other than a lost stray. The veterinarian had apparently contacted the authorities after suspecting that Joe might be keeping an endangered animal without knowing it. Heartbroken and helpless, Joe had no choice but to let Ella go. The connection he felt with her made the separation incredibly painful. Ella was taken to a shelter that specializes in caring for endangered species. Joe was warned never to bring exotic animals into the US without proper paperwork. Although he never saw Ella again, Joe took comfort in knowing she was in good hands. His journey with her had been unexpected, but it taught him a powerful lesson about wildlife and respecting the laws that protect it. So, that's all for today. What are your thoughts about this story? Tell us in the comment section below. And if you like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Your support means so much to us. Until then, take care and thanks for watching.